we're going to be covering, my name is Scarlett, and we are going to be covering a lot of stuff. So I won't have a lot of time to cover Q&A, but I will be spinning up an instance afterwards if people want to join in on me. I'll give my name at the end of this talk. I think it's also on the next slide. So I'm going to talk about some of the absolute basics around controller positioning and base station placement and stuff like that. Hopefully there's things that you will find that is new to you. This is a collection of information that the dance community has gathered over the last 4 or 5 years. As with anything in dance, it's very much building on the shoulders and efforts of each other, right? So I didn't come up with all of this material. I'm just collating it and sharing it with you all. So first half, maybe boring to some, maybe super interesting to others. Hopefully I solve a lot of your problems that are out there if you've been having tracking issues, etc. And then the second half is going to focus more on the psychology of dance and what we're doing and how I go about creating a good performance and how I deal with things like anxiety, stage fright, those kinds of things. So, who am I? Click. There we go. I'm Scarlett. I go by DanceCoachSCRLT, which really should have been at the top of that slide. It's SCRLT because I ran out of letters in VRChat's naming convention. But again, there'll be a QR code and my name at the very end of this deck. That account is specifically for doing lectures and workshops and what have you with people in VRChat. And so I accept any friend requests, and I am usually teaching several classes a week, and people can join in on me and see what's up. So a little bit about my credentials, what gives me the right to be up here. I've had a few years of dance, much less than a lot of people out there, but before I got into VR, I had attended several real-life dance courses for several years, and I've been doing virtual reality dancing for over 4 years now, for a variety of different clubs, a variety of different styles, from the more mature to go-go dancing. I have been a dance instructor for a dance captain for 100+ person dance clubs, 100+ dancer clubs, and I'm an instructor at the VRChat Open Dance Studio, or VODS, which is a free virtual reality dance studio where people can get together and just share their passion about dance and learn a variety of different skills. I'm also part of a very talented crew that has, over the last year, been attending furry conventions and setting up VRChat backstage so that we can do go-go dancing using our avatars behind the DJs. And that's been a lot of fun to participate in and help grow and flourish. I might also be talking kind of fast because there's a lot of material to cover. 1 hour actually isn't enough. But this will be posted on YouTube later through Furality once they're done editing and everything. And so I do recommend students review material because there's things that you'll learn on second and third passes. So we're going to dive right in. These magical boxes called base stations, right? They send out these lasers, and our equipment is designed to pick up those lasers and figure out where in space the timings from the different base stations arrived. Now, according to Valve, when you're looking at the base station manual and everything, let's go to root sources, right? They actually have some great recommendations, right? Avoiding very bright light in the room to avoid the sensors from being overloaded. Mounting them securely because there's a little tiny motor inside there that's humming along and moving a mirror back and forth. And if the thing that it's mounted to is not stable, you can end up getting resonant vibrations that make it so that you introduce jitter. So there might be nothing wrong with your controllers and yourself, but it might be because you've mounted the base station to something that's not exactly stable. I have some very long mounts in order to get clearance away from bookshelves and stuff, and I had to do some research to find mounts that were actually quite stable and robust to avoid that jitter. Speaking of bookcases and what have you, you want to make sure that there's no obstruction. So I've seen students that complain that their feet tracking stopped working, and it's because they have something like a dresser or a bed or what have you that is casting a shadow from that base station, and so their feet can't even see the base station, right? So like your trackers have to be able to see the base station as a ground rule. And then if you've got more than two, or if you've got two or more base stations, the general recommendations is to mount them semi-diagonally across the room. So not necessarily straight on, because we tend to perform aligned with our room. So we want them at an angle so that they can see kind of in front and behind us and get extra coverage, because ideally you have two base stations seeing a tracker at any given time. When you are setting up your boundaries for your performance, when you're going to be dancing, you want to make sure that your floor boundaries are always visible wherever you are in the space. You don't want them kind of disappearing and your brain losing track of where you are in the space, because we're focused on performing and dancing. I should note that a lot of the tips and tricks that I'm going to be providing, they are equally applicable if you're on the dance floor as well as if you're on stage, okay? So boundaries you want on at all times so that you can see them. I don't have the walls up, but I have the line on, and I set the line to be a color that's something that's easy to see in most environments. For me, it's kind of a bluish green. If it's too yellow, it tends to blur into the whites, and if it's too dark, then it'll blur into darker venues. Now, if you go into advanced mode when you're setting up, doing your room setup, you can actually, as you can see in the slide, you can actually notch out little tiny aspects of the room to give your brain a clue as to which direction you're facing in the room. And also to notch out things like, desks or what have you, to give you an idea of where your keyboard is placed. So the notches don't necessarily have to be one-to-one with your room boundaries, right? You can give yourself little hints and clues that way. A lot of dancers use OVR advanced settings, and these are two screenshots that are the two main pages for setting up your boundaries if you're using OVR advanced settings. Steam has really improved over the years as far as how it operates, but these are the two main pages that I use and I counsel people to use. And that center marker is important. We'll get back to it later, but OVR advanced settings with its center marker has some really nice aspects to it. Now, if you're dancing with a corded headset, keep in mind that if you have a pulley system, what you're doing is you are constraining that cord. The amount of times you can twist before you start putting pressure on the wires on the inside of that cord has been shrunk down to just the last few feet before the first attach point on the ceiling, okay? So I actually stopped using pulley systems because one year I went through 8 index cables at $100 a pop. I burned through one in a single weekend because the twisting in all of the different aspects of my dancing was so intense. And at that time, I was using a pulley system, and all of my turns were being compressed down to that one last few feet. So I don't tend to use a pulley system. I tend to perform, and some of the more advanced dancers that I dance with that do rolls and lots of ground movement and what have you, they also have gotten rid of the pulley system, and they just carefully. There's a little movement that you'll catch. It's a little bit of a tell where you'll see a dancer going like that, and they'll swoop their leg, and that's getting the cord out of the way so that they can do some kind of move in that direction. There is a utility called Cable Guardian out there, especially if you have a pulley system. I highly recommend a tool like this. And what it will do is it will shout at you to turn in a specific direction once you've done too many turns in one way or the other. So it helps keep you on track, unwinding your headset. That center marker, I believe I have a slide coming up, also has indicators that tell you, but in the middle of a dance you kind of forget, and this thing speaks to you over your headset what you need to do. Oh, here we go. So the center marker, as you can see in that slide, is really handy because it's got two different aspects to it. One is the little tiny arrows that swoop around that are indicating that I need to turn 3 times to my right. I need to turn 3 times clockwise to get back to the headset as it was set up when I put the headset on. So if my cord's already tangled when I put the headset on, it's not going to help you. Make sure your cord is untangled when you put on the headset, but this OVR Advanced Settings center marker can really help you with that. The other thing that it does is it tells you the direction that you should be facing. So there's a bigger arrow in the center marker, and that bigger arrow corresponds to the opposite direction of where you pulled your trigger when you told Steam VR where your computer was. So there's that first step where it's like, tell me where your computer is, and you have to point to it, pull your trigger. That's what it's doing. It's figuring out which direction you should face so that your cord is always behind you as you're playing your games and what have you. Because if your cord's in front of you and you're playing a boxing game or something, you're going to be constantly hitting that cord. And so, because if your computer is in front of you, that kind of thing. So that's where that's coming from. And one more, let me just check my time. I think I'm doing really good, actually. One last utility is that I'm going to recommend people consider is Stop Sign VR. And what this does is it lets you create any size box, as narrow, as tall, as wide as you want, and have it always be in the world exactly aligned with reality. And so in this case, I have a very thin object that comes down from my ceiling to my floor, and I don't want to be running into it as I'm performing or as I'm talking and socializing. I don't want to be whacking it with my arm. And so in this screenshot, we've configured a very small, narrow box that's very tall that indicates that there's an object here that I want to avoid. And then most people use this for indicating where their big screen TVs are, or where their end tables are. If they can't move some furniture out of the way, you can put a box down on the floor, and that gives you a clue as to where things are set up. So that's all of the room scale setup, with one little diversion about the size of the room. So I frequently get students that show up in class and they say, I can't dance on stage because I've got a small room, right? I've got a path between my bed and the wall, and I've got this much space front and back, and so I don't have enough space to do all these crazy power moves. And I want to share some anecdotes with you, stories from other students, right, as a bit of an inspiration, because dance, like any art form, you find your style when you are overcoming adversity, when you're overcoming a challenge. You hand a student a camera and you tell them they can only shoot with a specific type of lens and a specific shutter speed and what have you, and you constrain them, and they will find new ways to make photos that they would have never thought of before, right? Same thing happens with dancing. I know an absolutely amazing top-tier dancer that has so little room they can't actually get down on the floor. They've got like 2 feet wide by 3 feet back. And they've developed a dance style unique to them, because few people, not everybody has this kind of limitation, that focuses more on upper body movements and distraction, right? And getting close to the viewer. And it doesn't rely on the big flashy moves of doing dolphin dives or power slides or any of that jazz that other dancers migrate towards as they go up in levels of difficulty. I know a performer that only has 3-point tracking. They have hands and head, and that's all they have. And they have actually figured out a way to make it so that when they space move down in the air, their avatar goes into more of a push-up position as it gets close to the ground. And so they can actually do groundwork, and they can make it look like they're jumping on the ground, like doing, you know, the push-off clap type animation or whatever. Like, they can do all these things with their avatar, and they have this big constraint. That's all they can do. And they figured out how to make it work for them. There's people that have medical challenges, right? And you know, if the knees don't work as well, or the hips, they focus more on the upper body, right? And figuring out ways to make this more expressive, or vice versa. People with back issues attend my classes, and I tell them not to do the rolls, right? And the other groundwork and stuff, right? And you have to respect your body's limitations, but working within those and not using them as an excuse. I implore you that those of you that think that you may not be able to do this kind of thing, like, no. It's completely possible, and it's up to you to decide to do it. So I wanted to introduce that thought for those of you that think your room might not be big enough. Now me, I got rid of all my furniture because I love to dance. I put down 2 sheets of 4x8 plywood, and I put down some kind of linoleum covering so there'd be smooth surfaces for a dance floor, and I screwed them into my carpet. I'm sure my apartment complex loves me. I made sure that it wouldn't ruin the carpet and everything. I did tests first, but I do have a very large play space that I can operate in so that I can do certain types of moves that I wanted to do, but it's not required by any means. Okay, so moving on. That is, let me look at the time. Gosh dang, I zipped through that quite well. So that means that we can talk a lot about the psychology of dance and how to make our performances really hit home. Oh, sorry, we are still talking. This isn't psychology, I apologize. Where it goes wrong, there's 2 different slides that have that sentiment. This is still tracking issues, okay? So if you have reflective surfaces in your room, such as a piece of artwork, right? Or a poster that has a plastic sheet over the top of it, or a television, or a window, or your computer monitor, all of these things can potentially bounce that light, that laser coming from the little boxes, and make it seem like the controller is facing the box, even though it's actually facing a reflection. So we want to look for any reflective surfaces. If you're having problems with your tracking, your hand occasionally floats off into the sky or what have you, you want to look for reflective surfaces in your room. Vibrations we've talked about. Dead spots, which would be the shadows that we talked about. Clothing. If you wear baggy clothing or loose clothing, that can end up covering up your hip tracker and shadowing some of the sensors on it and making it so that the tracker can't pick it up very well. Self-occlusion, where you're covering up the tracker using your own body. Like if you're dancing really small and tight and keeping your hands close to yourself, well, I've got a massive shadow from the tracker behind me. It can't see me. If I'm dancing loud and proud and big, then my hands have an opportunity to be seen by all the trackers in my room. And when I get to the slides on tracker placement, we're going to cover how to best optimize to avoid self-obstruction. This is something that's super important actually. You want to make sure that your hands, your hand controllers, at least in the index ecosystem, pair to the headset itself. The headset has effectively a dongle built into it for 2 trackers. And it has a very high bandwidth connection to the computer. And it's very, very close to the trackers in question, if these trackers are the ones that pair to the headset. If you accidentally pair one hip tracker to the headset, and then you pair the hand's going to pair to the hip tracker dongle off in Timbuktu, and one of your hands is not going to be updating as frequently and accurately. And you want these to update, especially if you're using emotes and expressions like I do with my avatar. And so you want to make sure that also your hands are your most expressive aspect of your performance. Wherever your hand travels, that's where the viewer's eyes tend to look at, just through human psychology. And so you want these to be tracking as fluidly as possible. So what I recommend is when you're setting up your system, make sure all the dongles are unplugged from your computer, except the headset, and then pair the hands together. It's real easy to test if this is what's happened. You unplug all the dongles, and if your hands suddenly turn blue in the index ecosystem, then that means the controller was paired to to one of the dongles you unplugged, and you've got to repair it to the headset. It's really important too, if you read the specs, to have something like 18 inches different distance between the Bluetooth dongles, okay? Because they can interfere with each other. So I have 1 meter USB extensions, and I've taped them to my wall in a fashion so that each of the dongles is about 1.5 to 2 feet away from each other, and that massively improved my tracking accuracy. And finally, something that I don't hear brought up very often is that there's little tiny divots on your tracker, little tiny depressions in the tracker that can accumulate oils from your skin. And those divots are actually a piece of plastic that's slightly transparent to infrared laser light. And then there's a little tiny camera sensor underneath that divot. And so if that gets all smeared with oil from your skin, or sweat, or a beverage or whatever, then that little divot can no longer provide input as to where your hand is connected. So occasionally consider cleaning off your controllers in the manufacturer recommended way to improve your tracking accuracy. I feel like there was one other thing that I thought of that wasn't in my slides, but we are gonna go on. So there's a statement in the dance community that you aren't a dancer if you haven't had a technical issue. Almost any given performance, something will go wrong, okay? When these trackers were first created for virtual reality, they thought people would screw them onto a keyboard. There was actually a great keyboard. I think Logitech made it. I wish they still made it. That had a screw stud on it that you could screw a tracker onto, and then the keyboard would be in the world overlay. The keyboard overlay would be positioned exactly where the real life keyboard was at all times, because the keyboard was tracked. Or a prop in a military simulation game. They thought there would be a tracker on a prop. They didn't think people would strap 11 trackers to their bodies and go throwing themselves around the room, right? So we're pushing the boundaries of technology, which means that things will fail. Things will stop working, okay? Now, if my hand suddenly stops tracking, I could stand there on stage like tapping it and calling attention to it, right? Or what I recommend is to be performing while that hand is stuck in position, right? Maybe move so that you're in front of that hand, right? And even if it's your entire body that stopped working, provided it's not like a cable unplug, you need to go plug it in, keep moving. because from the viewer's perspective, this way psychology works, as soon as you snap back into tracking mode, as soon as everything fixes itself, they're going to take what you were doing in that moment and back propagate it for as long as you've been losing tracking. So if you're just standing there waiting, you know, kind of silly or whatever to get the tracking back, and then you start performing, they're going to think that you've been standing there the whole time, which, I mean, honestly, you were. If you've been dancing, as soon as that comes back online, then you're going to snap into dancing, and that will give the viewers an impression that you've been continuing to dance, and they'll just chalk it up to network issues or latency or whatever. Maybe it's on their end, and they won't associate it with your performance. So that's pro tip to think about when you're doing a performance that a lot of people are watching. We'll see what happens tonight when I'm performing in what is it, 6 hours or so, I don't know. Tonight I'm doing a dance performance, and I'm sure there will be a technology problem, and you're going to see me just dance through it. Okay, so where do we stick our trackers? We're going to start out with 3-point tracking. That's the head and 2 hands. You stick your trackers on your hands, right? Those are your controllers. The next one is 4-point. Some people do call this 3-point because it's 2 hands and a waist. I think 4-point is more accurate because most people talk about 11-point tracking, which includes the head. So where you want the tracker is to be on the back quadrants of the hips. And then go ahead and bring the camera back to me. I will demonstrate. If it's on the front of your waist, then when you bend over towards the crowd, if you're on stage, then you're going to be obstructing yourself. Or if you're doing a ground crawl along the floor, you're going to be obstructing yourself, that tracker, if it's on the front. If it's exactly to the sides, you're going to donk it as you do arm sways, and that will make your hip jitter. If it's on the back, when you do either a back roll or something like a candlestick, which is a move that looks like this, you're going to get the biggest bruise you've ever had, and you'll not want to do that again. So that pretty much leaves the front 2 diagonals and the back 2 diagonals. If I was standing on a clock, the 4 o'clock and the 8 o'clock position is what I recommend, because you're less likely to obstruct it from the front, and it stays out of the way of just about any kind of move you could want to make. The next one are the feet, and now we start getting into full body tracking mode. On the feet, there's a few different tips. You can attach them to the feet, the bridge of the foot, and this gives you the ability to control the angle of the foot. So you can kind of see me curling my toes in the middle of a performance. You can see me do a releve and get up on my toes. I like this because it gives me the most nuance in my performance. Now, some people will attach it to the ankle. The nice thing about the ankle is you have a lower risk of having it be kicked off in the middle of a performance. I have straps that have an ankle piece of Velcro that go around the back of the ankle, and so that reduces the risk of me kicking the trackers off my feet. Also, you might find that your avatar maps better to your body shape and size if your trackers are on your ankles versus the arches of your feet. So give it a try. See if it works better for you. Everybody's different. The nice thing about putting them on the ankles is that you can have them more towards the outside edge, so that if you're doing groundwork, if you're down on the ground crawling towards the edge of the stage or what have you, then there's much less chance of obstruction and occlusion if they're on the sides of the ankles. I will tend to modify my stance so that my feet are angled a little bit further out in order to maintain tracking if I notice that I'm having a tracking issue. So that's feedback on the feet and where to put trackers there. chest. Okay, so the chest tracker, this is the configuration that I will perform in most often if I'm wanting to be extravagant and have the extra 3 trackers. So if you can afford 3 spare trackers, if you can afford 1 spare tracker, then I recommend doing the chest because it allows for, I don't have it on right now, but it allows for you to rotate your head separate from your shoulders. So I can, if I had it on, I could look over my shoulder at the camera and my shoulders wouldn't rotate as much in looking to the camera as it is right now. So I like having the chest tracker. Some people, and then if you can get to 9-point tracking and afford that, there's 2 places you could put them. I like putting them on the elbows because it allows for tracking nuances as far as right now, when I rotate my hand, the elbow tracks with it. The elbow will curve with it. Whereas if I have an elbow tracker, if I had an elbow tracker on, then just my hand would be twisting and the forearm, and my elbow would stay in place. So it gives me extra nuance, and I use a lot of upper body movements. And so for me, elbow trackers make more sense than knee trackers, which is the other place you could stick the next 2 trackers. That said, without having elbow trackers, you can incorporate them into your performance. And again, this goes along with that whole lean into your limitations spiel that I gave earlier. If I want to kind of strut towards the camera with my elbows in and be a little bit more sultry, right? I can rotate my hand so that my elbows are in. If I want to strut towards the camera, right, and be a little bit more aggressive, then I can rotate my hands while they're on my hips and I can stick my elbows out. So you can always find ways to lean into the inverse kinematics that VR chat is doing and bend it to your will to create nuanced performances that other people may not be thinking about. And then finally, 11-point tracking, that includes the knees, or vice versa, includes the elbows if you prefer the knees. Knee tracking is handy if you're doing a lot of groundwork and you're focusing on the fluidity of the groundwork. But that's kind of a niche space. But again, it's up to you and your dance style. So do and explore what works best for you. With that, I'm just going to check. I'm going to get a drink of water real quick. Knee pads. Oh my God. Every single class at VR Chat Dance Studio, Open Dance Studio, we tell people at the beginning of the class, invest in knee pads. They're bulky, they look terrible, but nobody in VR is going to be seeing the knee pads. They range from the cheapest gardening knee pads that you can get all the way up to the $60 tactical gel-filled airsoft and paintball knee pads, which are designed to like literally throw yourself into cover and your knees won't feel a thing. Your knees are going to be one of the fastest joints to get injured if you're not careful with, no matter your age, if you're not careful while dancing in VR chat. They take all the weight and the strain and the directional changes and like you want to protect your knees. Even if I have gymnastics padding down sometimes if I know that I'm going to be doing a lot of rolls and what have you. And I have come out of VR and my knees were it was very graphic, let's put it that way. There was something sharp that had fallen into one of the creases of my padded flooring gymnastics pads, okay? So even if you've got carpet or soft flooring or whatever, knee pads are still gonna protect you. Now, the other great thing about knee pads is they allow you to do things like power slides, which I was going to demonstrate, but we're short on time, so I'm going to skip through that. But you can get knee pads like for rollerblading that have more of a Teflon smooth surface that allow you to glide over carpets, and you can get ones that are more fabric covered that allow you to glide on harder wood floors. And I've had students that duct taped socks to their knees. Okay, so like again, if you don't have $5 to go to Home Depot and pick up a pair of gardening knee pads that are just made of cloth and a little bit of fabric, you can jury rig one for yourself. Okay, protect yourself. The next one is shin guards. Now, very few people actually use these, but I kept injuring my shins, and so there was a 3 or 4 month period where I actually invested in and kept wearing shin guards. My point with this slide is just to underscore that whatever challenges you're facing, be thinking about creative solutions, right? You don't have to endure a hardship that's only going to get worse. So protect yourself and your body. Take care of it. And then the gymnastics padding. I will post on Blue Sky and Twitter a Google Docs document that contains links to the things that dancers have found work for them. And this is the type of padding that I personally use. And I think it might be the type of padding that other instructors use. We don't necessarily recommend the puzzle piece padding, the tile floor that like it's foam, EVA foam or whatever it is that clicks together like Lego puzzle pieces, because that and it's too thin. It ends up shifting. It ends up coming apart. There are some dancers where it's worked. I suspect it's probably because they were able to go wall to wall, and so there's a lot less shifting going on in that space. But the bigger gymnastics padding, the thicker stuff, is what a lot of dancers end up settling on as they progress through their dance experience. And then we've got chin straps. You'll find that a lot of the different types of moves that you do will have your head going in different directions that headset manufacturers may not have anticipated. And just getting a fairly cheap piece of stretchable Velcro from a craft store or Amazon will do wonders in keeping the head in place and keeping it from slipping off. I have had performances where I didn't have a chin strap and the headset came flying off. Sometimes I was able to catch it and put it on in mid-air, and people weren't aware what I had just pulled off. But chin straps are a wonderful thing to consider if you're starting to become more active and moving around. And then we've got, if you've got a mix and match VR system where you've got something like the Oculus and you're trying to integrate it with the index trackers and what have you, there is I'll leave this slide up for just a bit so people can get a screenshot or whatever. There's a GitHub project called OpenVR Space Calibrator, but you want to look for the fork that Arctic Fox 8515 made, because this fork continually recalibrates. You don't have to stick a controller on your head and do a figure 8 with your head. This thing, if you get a controller, if you get a tracker, I should preface it, if you have a spare tracker, and you attach it with Velcro or something, or when I was doing this, you can take the slide down now. When I was doing this, I had the tracker on the head strap that goes across the top of the head, and this will just constantly be shifting your play spaces and trying to align them at all times. Really, really handy tool. Lots of dancers that know about this use it. Okay, then we've got the things you need to do before you actually dance. So this is all the hardware. This is all the setup. Very first thing is before you put on the headset, you want to make sure you've got your water, because dancing takes a lot of effort and we forget how much we need to hydrate and how exhausting it can be. That's one of the beauties of VR chat, is that we lose ourselves in it, but that also means that we can forget to be hydrating and taking care of ourselves. So you want to make sure you stay hydrated between songs during the set and what have you. And you want to make sure that your room is cleared of any obstacles, okay? So like I have had times, so basically the things that are in your play space when you have the headset off, you're walking through your room all day long and you see that Lego or you see the book or you see whatever and you step over it. In VR, you're not going to see it. So I like to say I don't judge if you're into stepping on Legos, but that's not for me. So make sure you pick up the things that would hurt you and make sure you pick up the things that you don't want to break. I broke an extremely expensive Pimax headset when those first came out because it had fallen out from the shelf where it was stored and was on the floor and I didn't notice it. So I did a leaping jump in VR and landed right on it. So you, avoid those mistakes. I've also had a yoga ball come rolling out into my play space. And I did a really big jump up and landed right on the yoga ball and was flat on my butt. I could have seriously hurt myself there. Fortunately, I was able to roll with it, haha. But you want to make sure that your play space is empty, and you want to do a check every now and then as well while you're performing. And then you want to warm up your body, and you want to do it not with the intention of stretching. Studies have shown that if you're about to do extensive sports, or active sports, stretching can reduce the ability of your tendons to keep your joints where they belong. So you want to do a quick warm-up, whether that's like jumping jacks, or the one that I like is a knee raise while you're also doing crunches. You do that for about 60 seconds, and you'll warm up your body and get it prepped knowing that you're about to do stuff. You're going to tear less muscles. You're going to injure yourself less. Make sure you're warming yourself up before you get into performance. Space manipulation to make up some time. I teach classes and workshops on space manipulation and how to use it to make a more impactful performance that the viewers are unaware of what all is going on. Suffice to say that you want to make sure your play space, you're facing the part of your room that has the best tracking. Right now I'm not, ironically enough, and so my left hand is occasionally jittering because I wanted to make sure I had enough space to walk out from the podium while I was talking to you all. So it depends on what your intentionality is, but usually you want to be facing the direction that has the best tracking. So we dance. A lot of the reason why I want to dance is to help the viewer lose themselves into the environment that they're in. I want them to forget they're sitting at home, possibly alone. I want them to be enjoying their time and just be immersed and feeling as though they're sitting with the crowd of people around them, right? So if I'm dancing way up here in the air because I miscalibrated myself, right, I'm going to be calling attention to the fact that we're all in a virtual construct, right? So my performances try to be as aligned as possible to the real world. So I make sure my feet are on the ground. If I'm dancing in a crowd, I make sure that I'm not clipping through people. I'm respecting their phantom sense so that I'm not distracting them unnecessarily. And we're just bringing the music to life and feeling it. So along those lines, most songs, we're now shifting into like psychology of dance and how to make the performance good. So, oh, and backstage, would you tell me if the countdown timer is the hard stop or is that like the 5-minute warning stop? Because I don't have my watch on. So, most music, it just turned red, so I'm guessing that's a hard stop. So, we'll keep going. Most music that you'll dance to, if it's like the pop genre, it has a cycle to it where broken into 1-minute lengths. So most pop music is either 2 or 3 minutes long. The chorus is in between those sections, and it will be building up and up and up, and then there will be a drop, and then it'll be building up and up and up, and then there'll be a drop, and then it'll build up, and then it ends with a bit of a drop. And so as you're dancing, you want to be thinking about that, because music is the backdrop to your performance, right? It's like if you watch movie trailers with the music turned off and it's just dialogue. It's like, why would I watch this movie? You turn on the music, all of a sudden it's a science fiction, hard science fiction, or it's a horror movie, or it's a comedy. Like, the music completely changes the mood. And the music that we're performing to, that's backing us up, and we're backing it up, right? So be paying attention to those arcs, and I talk more about this in my other classes. Also pick out words for attention, right? So if like the artist is sounding angry, maybe you want to be dancing with a little bit more aggressive movements, right? And like have a little bit more aggressive attitude, right? But if it's a slow, flowy song, right, about love and whatever, right, you want to be emoting that with your body. So I want to make sure we have time to talk about anxiety and what to do, stage fright. In VR, you can always close your eyes. I don't recommend leaning on this for too much, because I know one dancer that actually performed almost the entire first year with her eyes closed, and expressed frustration that she couldn't break herself of that habit after an entire year. So you can do it if you're feeling overwhelmed. What I recommend instead is focus on one individual. Be dancing for that one person in the crowd. And then after a few minutes, right, you can move to the next person, be performing to them. The beauty of VR chat is your eyes are looking to each person on their screen. They don't know who you're actually looking at. They just know you're facing that general direction. And so it's a wonderful trick. You can also look above their heads, right? Don't look at the person themselves, just stare at the chair behind them that's empty, and that can help you move through the anxiety. And finally, you can also turn your back to the crowd, right? Performing like this is a completely viable aspect of dance for a short while, right? You don't want to do it for too long, but you can do that to reset your anxiety levels, right? Take a deep breath, nice and slow as you're dancing to the music. Maybe look at any other dancers that are on the stage if you happen to be dancing that kind of club, to pick up some ideas of what to do next. And the other thing to keep in mind is that anxiety tends to be a projection of ourselves, and this applies anywhere, not just dance. It tends to be a projection of ourselves into what we think the other person is thinking, right? So we might be up here thinking, oh gosh, they all think that I'm a bad dancer, right? I'll be on stage with people much better than me, and I'll be like, gosh, I need to pop off more. You know what? The times where I just dance for myself and I have fun, that gets the most cheers from the crowd. The ones where I'm like doing the most technical, hardest moves and what have you, they're like, me, whatever. Like, I mean, it's not as good as that guy over there. I mean, but when I'm dancing for myself and I'm just feeling it, right? Those are some of the best performances. And if you're up here dancing and feeling it, I guarantee you, the person in the crowd isn't thinking, oh, wow, they're a sucky dancer. They might be, okay, but that tells me more about that person than it does about you as a dancer, right? Most people out there in the crowd are going to be like, gosh, dang, that person's giving up an hour of their time or however long of their time to help me feel better, right? To give me a performance, right? It doesn't matter if you're just up here doing this, just kind of bouncing side to side. You're giving your time to the audience, and the audience will appreciate that. So think about that. If you're ever in a situation where you're feeling anxious and anxiety and there's other people involved, a lot of times it's our own fears and what have you, and we think the other person is thinking the same thing, but it's not. It's rarely true. Real quick, you gotta be big when you're on stage. I don't want to see people dancing with their arms all tight and closed. You gotta have your arms massive and wide. You gotta own the stage. especially if you're dancing towards the back of the stage. You got to be really big to take up more pixels on the person's headset, right? Don't be dancing like this. Be out, be big. Also, psychology tells us that there's a study in which it was a double-blind study where participants were sometimes told to stretch out like this, almost like a T-pose, like legit. Stretching out like this, putting their hands up, stretching, right? Being in a kind of an alpha dominant position, whatever, before an interview. They did that for 10 seconds. And across the board, the interviewers, without knowing that that was the set of people that had done this, graded those interviewers as being more competent. They somehow picked up the fact that that person had done a confidence pose because the person themselves, they tricked their brain into becoming more confident. So when I say be big on stage, that is also tricking your own brain to give you more confidence, okay? So this stuff has real world applications that can help you out everywhere. So please do try it. Let's see. And then I think we're just about done. Perfect timing. So how do you get better with dancing, okay? Attending classes, of course. I'm going to be a little biased there. Nothing quite beats having somebody give you feedback. The way most of my classes are set up, you're dancing one-on-one with one other person, and that person is giving you feedback that you can use that's constructive. Some of my classes are like everybody on stage, and I'm giving everybody feedback from what I see as being the most dominant thing to work on. But the classes are wonderful. They push you out of your comfort zone, and you will end up growing. Also, I do want to say real quick, there's 3 types of artists. There's the artist that is naturally talented, right? They know how to draw roses. That's all they ever draw. And they're really good at it. But they don't see their challenges, and so that's all they ever do. There's the artist that feels that there's too many challenges. There's too much things and flaws and what have you. And they also will not improve, right? Because they get overwhelmed. It's the artists that see all the flaws, recognize they're not perfect, but they pick one thing to work on. Those are the Michelangelos. You ask any artist out there that you think is amazing, right, about the last thing that they posted on social media, and is like, is that your apex art? And they'll be like, oh no, I wish I could rip that up and burn it, right? Right? Like, no artist sees their latest work and thinks, very few artists, I guess, sees their latest work and is like, oh, it's perfect. There's nothing more that I could have done there. Same thing with dance. Same thing with anything that you do and you put yourself towards. If you can see the flaws, you're on the right track to becoming better, to becoming a great, because that means that you can see where to go next, okay? So please do consider that. Last 2 points on the slide was watching other dancers, and for input and insights and what have you, and slow motion YouTube. Also, there's some dance worlds. We're gonna end with this slide. Go ahead and keep this slide up. My name has been DanceCoachSCRLT. I go by Scarlett, but this is my social media accounts everywhere. I teach at VRC Dance, discord.gg VRC Dance. VRC Open Dance Studio is what that stands for. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I have this account. I'm going to spin up a public instance where people can join in on DanceCoachSCRLT about 5 minutes from now. And it'll be an open Q&A session. We'll gather together. And thank you so much for joining me. And I hope you have a wonderful time at Furality, and I hope to see you on the dance floor.